My name is Sonia Boyd, and I'm a master gardener here in Coleman County. And today we're talking about rain gardens. As you know, the Agriplex is a lovely rain garden out back, and Holly Hirschberg was here during the startup of that rain garden, and she actually maintains it. And so you'll get to meet with her today, and so it's been 10 years, and so she'll have a lot of stories of things that have happened in the last 10 years. Of course, not in the last 3 or 4 months, because there hasn't been any rain. Hasn't been any rain. Exactly. So today, Tony Glover was unable to come with us today. He is the retired Coleman County or Coleman City, Coleman area extension agent. He did get injured, and so luckily he picked up the best man to do the job. This is Brian Brown, Northeast Alabama. He covers a big territory that includes some of Coleman and Marshall and many others. Yeah. And whenever Kira needs them. So.
Well, I appreciate y'all coming out tonight. We're going to talk about rain gardens today, and one of the biggest things with rain gardens is it's called a rain garden, but I don't know if that's really, I don't like that term in particular. I understand where it comes from, but I like to talk about stormwater management. So I really like that term. That's a personal term, sorry, but yeah, it's just whatever you feel, But I love stormwater management because I dealt a lot with landscape design, and so I used to work for a company over in Arley, so just right over here. It was on the lake, and we did a lot of lake properties. And does anybody live at Smith Lake? Well, you know how it is though. If y'all have ever been to the lake, it's like every yard is straight down into the lake. So we dealt a lot with water movement, and a lot of what we see is containing water and trying to keep that erosion from happening, because that's what really happens a lot. Is you get a lot of erosion, especially with a heavy slope. Now, rain gardens encompasses that, but it also encompasses a lot of other things. So really, what are you going to do with that water? So Coleman, I grew up in Walker County, so right down the road here in Oatman. Y'all probably don't know where that's at. Okay, well, a lot of people don't, but I grew up there, and I have seen Coleman explode in the past 10 years. It has just really, really grown so much, and I love to see the growth. I mean, what's some things y'all want to see come here? Everybody wants to see more come, right? Y'all have a Publix now. I mean, that's like top tier, right? So is there anything y'all want to see come here? Target, yeah. Sam's Club. Yeah, Target would be a good one. I'm surprised I hadn't built one yet. But, when you talk about...
We have a distribution center from a competitor.
Oh, that's right.
One of the biggest employers in the county.
Right. There you go. That's fine. So, anytime you get any kind of new box store or any kind of strip mall, that's the new thing now. What do you have to have? Parking. So you think about Walmart parking lot. How big is Walmart parking lot? It's huge. I mean, I don't think it's a stretch to say it's at least 3 to 4 acres, at least. I live in Arab, and our parking lot at Walmart floods if we get a big rain. We did get a big rain, I guess it's been 2 years ago. I've only seen it rain that hard one other time in my life, and it was like monsoon. It was like God was pouring out buckets of water on us. I mean, it was unreal. And the Walmart parking lot flooded. And the reason why is because they have to figure out how much water they've got to take away. They don't design it for that. It was an unusual situation, but you've got to figure out what to do with that water. It's the same way with your house. What are you going to do with that water? So, and that's where rain gardens comes in. So, all that to say is, that's why I say stormwater management. We got to figure out what we're going to do. My house is a prime example of that. My gutters go straight into my beds, which I'm working on that. Whenever I get time, I will address that. But it floods right there at my door. So I have to do something to manage that water and take it away from there. I get a lot of calls with a lot of problems with their plants, the first thing I look to is if it's a foundation planting right up next to the house. First thing I consider is, okay, where's your downspouts? Most of the time, if it's a plant dying next to the foundation, it's probably close to a downspout. So, but you can use rain gardens to eliminate those things. So, all that being said, let's get started. So what is a rain garden? We've kind of hit on this a little bit. Rain gardening in the South said that rain gardens are ecologically designed gardens for drought, deluge, and everything in between. So that's it's essentially a garden shaped into a bowl. That's the simple definition of it. So you have this bowl, you dig it out, and it's really a place for that water to settle. You have excess water, it can settle and it can percolate. We'll talk about percolation here in a bit. But first and foremost, it is a garden. It is a great place to grow plants. That's what a garden is, right? It's a place to grow plants. And all gardens need planting and care. So you can't just willy-nilly throw plants out there. You should do a little bit of planting. I know a lot of people love to just throw plants out there. They see something at the garden center. Oh, that's pretty. Let me put it in my yard. Well, do you have a place for it in your yard? Or is it a shade plant and you have all sun? Or is it a sun plant and you have all shade? Those are things you got to think about when you're buying plants. Now, that's just free advice in general, so take it or leave it. But specifically in a rain garden, it's often designed to catch the first inch of rainwater from a given area. So usually amended soils and plants that help increase that infiltration rate, and it helps treat pollutants and potential pathogens. So going back to my example with Coleman, being that it is a vastly growing city, what else comes with parking lots? New roads, right? What do they make roads out of? Asphalt. What's in asphalt? Petroleum products, right? So you do get some of that runoff into different areas. But you can use a rain garden to help filter some of those things out. So I'll put this video as an example. I think I can get it to play here. This was my house in Opelika when I lived there. I just want you to see the water. This happened anytime I got a heavy rain. This is what happened. It's flooded right there, just right there below my house there. But you can see how much water is moving, and it was a good steady rain. It was actually heavy rain, but what do you notice on this runoff here? It's orange. Where do y'all think that came from? Huh? New construction. Yep. So across the road, up this hill, about 50 yards, maybe even less than that, was a brand new subdivision. Now, when new construction goes in, they're supposed to manage that. They're supposed to put in silt fences. Does it look like they put in a silt fence? I didn't ever go investigate, but I didn't have to, because they got runoff coming out, and absolutely, either the fence had broke, or they probably didn't mess around with it. They just said, forget it, we'll just do whatever. Because, hey, these properties were probably 2 acres apiece, and the minimum square footage and price was probably about $500,000. So they were worried about getting that money rather than they were stormwater runoff. But it is important. So it is more than pretty gardens. They're really miniature bioretention areas. And, there's usually on the larger scale, they'll call it bioretention areas. Ponds, they'll use ponds for bioretention areas. But this is more on the small scale. So building your garden, and you can have a rain garden be any size. But when we refer to bioretention areas, usually that's of scale. So how they help? Non-point source pollution. So that orange water that was flowing down through there, we would call that a non-point source pollution. So slow down water from stormwater, or slow down the flow from stormwater. I would say that's one of the key things, especially that I learned in landscaping. It's not necessarily stopping the water, it's slowing it down. So if you can slow that down, it makes a world of difference. especially in the erosion factor. It also helps reduce harmful deposits into streams and other surface waters. Where does everything drain here? Coleman's somewhat flat. Where's the lowest point in this area? What's that? Hansel? Does Hansel flood?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So is there a river or a creek or something that runs that way? Yeah, so I'm assuming that all the stormwater runoff ends up down there, right? Yeah.
Right here specifically, they have a problem right here at the interstate.
Yeah.
From this area that closes the interstate off.
I think I've seen that on the news where they have
Yeah.
had to
they
close
it
that.
down.
Yeah.
I heard a beaver built cut down in the, under the bridge or something.
Really?
That's what I heard.
Is it just that much water, or are they just trying to dam something up? That's pretty incredible. But yeah, even just shutting down the interstate, that's a big deal. How much traffic is on this interstate? I mean, I drive that going back to visit my parents, and it's like praying every time I join the interstate there. I'm like, oh Lord, please get me home, because it's madness for 4 miles to Casper exit. Okay, it also cleanses and filters. So we talked a little bit about this. There's beneficial soil bacteria that can help break things down. And these trap and possible break down some pollutants. There's a lot of plants that will actually gather some of these pollutants and uptake them, and you don't have that. Especially, there's some that you can use for even heavy metals. So don't ask me which ones they are, but I know they're out there. And your book actually has a really great list of plants. I thumbed through that earlier. And it'll have a good list of plants. And if you're interested in any of that, I can probably give you some information about which ones do what. But there are some harmful organisms that die from desiccation when your rain garden dies out, or dries out, sorry. So, here's some things to avoid with your rain garden. Ponding. Ponding, low spots and naturally standing water for days after large rains. This is not a great site for a rain garden, especially if it's a really large area. That's something you want to try to avoid. And one of the reasons why, because this, everybody's favorite. Mosquitoes can breed, and some people may have the question, do rain gardens, they collect rainwater, right? So does that increase mosquito population? The answer is no, they do not, because mosquitoes take about 4 days to hatch out. So you try to design your rain garden to try to drain out within 24 to 48 hours. I think I have a slide on that later, but about 48 hours is when you need to drain that out. So they don't have time to hatch out. It's going to dry out before they can hatch. As a matter of fact, this is the next slide. So if it's built correctly and has the proper drainage, about 48 hours is what you want to shoot for drainage time. And they do need about 4 to 10 days for mosquito deployment. So if you want to put in one, here's some things to consider. Where do you put it? All right, where can you catch the desired runoff and maximize infiltration rates? So it should be ideally placed in full or intermediate sunlight to facilitate drying, but shade possible if relatively well drained. So sunny location, 4 to 6 hours is fine for that. Also, between the source of runoff and the runoff destination. So if you're coming down from your roof on a downspout, where's that water going? So one thing you do if you're wanting to put in a rain garden, figure out, go outside when it rains. Let's pray it does rain. It's been a long time since we had any. So that's where everybody's at, I guess. They just figured it stopped raining and we're not going to get any more, right? But yeah, make sure you can, once it does finally rain, it will rain again, hopefully. See where that water's flowing. If you have a pretty heavy flow, see where that's going. And that would be a good spot to put your rain garden. So in between the runoff and the destination. Ideally about 10 feet away from your building foundation. If you laugh like you've been there before.
several times.
Yeah, and that's another reason why if you have downspouts, you really don't need that downspout going right there, right at your foundation, because it's going to get water down in either in your basement or ruin your foundation. So make that stuff go away from there, at least 10 feet. Now, what we always did when we did landscaping is we would put the attachment on there, and we'd dig a trench, and we'd usually run it out probably 25 feet. And we would put the little pop-ups, you know what I'm talking about, the little green ones that when they get water in them, they float, and it does that. So that was always what we did. We wanted to go way above and beyond what was required. All right, this is really important. It should not be placed in septic tanks or field lines. So that is, now you may get a lot of growth if it's close to a septic tank or field line, but don't do that. There's a lot of negatives to that. Usually a relatively flat section of your yard that has a well-drained soil. The second part of that, the well-drained soil, is probably one of the most important things you can have in that, because it is collecting rainwater, but you don't want it to be a pond. Going back to ponding, you want it to have something where it will percolate out. And it could be large enough that you could put some trees and some woody plants in there. Did y'all use any woodies out here? I've noticed some shrub-looking things, but I don't know what y'all used. What's that?
4 trees.
What kind were they?
Rancy Gravy, the black, what am I remembering? Black maple tree.
Okay.
I can't think of it.
Yeah, but y'all did use some woody plants.
Oh, and the pond.
Yeah, pond toppers. Yeah, that's a really good one. Any of the taxodium species, those are the bald cypresses. Those are good to use in that. They can get, if they're wet, they can get a little what's called knees on there, and the wetter it is, the more knees they get. But those are great trees to put in there. Things that have water in their name, like a river birch. River birches are messy. They're very, very messy, but they love water. So willows, things like that. So there's some pros and cons to different trees. So it's a give and take. But those are tolerant to wet soils. So how do you size your garden? It really can be any size and any shape. Most people will try to put like a kidney bean or a peanut shape in their yard. But generally they need to be large enough to catch the first inch of rain for a given area. I like to I'd like to see some incorporation into the landscape rather than just the random kidney bean bed out in the middle of your yard. If you're designing one of these, try to integrate it into a hardscape element. So if you have a driveway, don't just go out in the middle of it. Try to connect it to the driveway somehow. Maybe connect it to your house somehow. Just try to do something where it makes it flow a little bit better rather than just kind of dropping out in the middle of nowhere and just dropping in the middle of your lawn. So there's a lot of other things you can say about that. Things like maintenance. If you have like a little strip of grass in between your bed, your rain garden, and your driveway, that kind of creates a maintenance nightmare. So especially if you got like a riding lawnmower or something, it's kind of hard to cut, a strip that's 2 foot wide. So be careful when you're designing that, and try to integrate it more so into your landscape. Again, should fit your landscape. And again, paved areas may dictate your shape. So I love this design. I think it's really good, but you can see how it's connected to the walkway there, and that's probably where they got the most runoff. So they can watch when it rains, and it was probably sloped a little bit, and they saw that's where it's going, and they were probably getting a little bit of runoff and probably a little bit of erosion right there. And so I think that's a well-placed rain garden. It's got some nice looking plants in there too.
Mr. Brown, you have a Zoom.
What's that?
Do you have a Zoom on?
Oh, I don't know if I can do both.
Okay.
Yeah, is that Tom? Okay. Sorry. Black gum.
Black gum.
Yes.
Gum.
Yes. So, do I need to hold on and sign in on Zoom?
No, that's okay.
I forgot to sign on, but I don't know if we can do that in here. Well, I guess I could. Anyway. Okay, so when you're designing your garden and laying it out, so orient it so the runoff hits the long side of the garden first. So you don't want it parallel, so if it's coming from the wall there, coming this way, you kind of want to turn it perpendicular to that. So especially on a slope lawn, because you're getting that runoff coming down the lawn, and it's going to hold some of that back too. So try to orient where it's kind of on the long side. Now these pictures are from Fred Spicer. He's the former director of the Birmingham Botanical Garden, who's now at Chicago Botanic Garden. And if y'all have never seen Chicago Botanic Garden, it's incredible. Like it's one of the best gardens in the country. We did a tour with him about 3 or 4 years ago with the company I used to work for. And, I didn't know he was former Birmingham Botanic, so we talked a lot, so it was fun. But this was his yard, and you can kind of see where he's got the little arrow here, that's where it drained out. So it just had this little tiny opening right here. Now in heavy rainfall, guess what's going to happen to that water? It's just going to go right over the top of those bricks, right? So really, they wanted to manage that, and this is what he did. So,
I can see why he manages.
I'm sorry?
I can see why he manages.
Yeah, he's good. He's real good. But yeah, so he makes the swells and some, they put a lot of diversity of plants in there. Looks like a lot of native stuff in there, which a lot of people want to do, and you're encouraged to do, right? But this reduces the amount of water that runs into the, again, reducing your runoff, reducing pollutants, and really, you're trying to get that water to percolate down into the ground. That's what you're really trying to do. So slowing it down enough to where it can infiltrate. And this is another view. So yeah, he's real good. I can't do anything like that. I'm not that creative. There's another view. Now this is his plan for the garden. Now, Holly, do you have any input on this?
About what? About this?
About the design.
Oh, about the design.
Yeah.
Definitely. Let's see, he's got a berm.
Yep.
So that we keep it, he can put some things that can't take, because we've got berms out here for plants that can't take too much wet, but can
Right.
take some. So that's what we do. And then also that, the dip right there would also chat up, is that going out?
Right here.
Yes.
So this is a cross section, so it is curved here.
Uh-huh.
So you have your dip here, but they also have overflow pipe.
That's what
That's another one we'll get to here in a second. But this is basically his design for this. So, but like you said, there were plants that could tolerate dry conditions, and there's some that's in the lower section that would do wet conditions. So, how big do you make your garden? So, size of your drainage area. So pavement, roof, lawn, pretty much anything out there. That's the size of your drainage area. One thing you want to be to note is the native soil characteristics. So sand, silt, clay, those are our 3 things that make up mineral soils. If you haven't done a soil test yet, this is my plug to do a soil test. Have y'all done one before? Okay. If you haven't done one, you'll get back a lot of information, but one of the things you get back is what type of soil you have, and you can look it up and it will tell you the percentage, and they'll have, they'll name it usually after towns, so like they'll have the Hartzell series, it's named after Hartzell. I know there's a Townley series, and that's like in Walker County, like rural Walker County, so that's Townley series. I forgot what my soil is, but you can get online and see the actual percentages of what it is. So knowing what your native soil characteristics is important. And then your garden depression based on your slope, which is your depth at the center of that bowl that you've created for your rain garden. So if you want to determine how much you have in drainage area. You want to estimate that how much your rain garden will receive. So 1 inch of rain will produce about 0.62 gallons of water per square foot. So I'm going to give y'all two numbers that are very important. And where this 0.62, now I do it a little bit differently because I learned it the way I'm about to tell you. But 0.62, you're still going to arrive at the same answer. So, how many square feet are in an acre? Anybody know? You're close.
4,400.
Well, but you got the right number, 43,560. So 43,560. That's how many square feet are in an acre. It's about, I think it's 208 by 208, I think is the number. So that's, if you imagine 100 feet, so how wide is this room? Maybe, let's see, maybe 40 feet wide. So go 2.5 times this by 2.5 times this, that would be an acre. So that's one number I want you to remember, 43,560. The other number, and this is how I learned it, is 27,154. And 27,154 is how many gallons of water, rainfall, is on 1 inch of rain on 1 acre. They call it an acre inch. So 27,154. So, that being said, if you do the division there and you say how many inches per square foot, you say 27,154 divided by 43,560, and then you multiply your square footage, and then that spit out the number. Now, multiply it by 0.62 will give you the same answer, but that's just the way I learned it. So let's go back to the Walmart example. Y'all got a calculator on your phone? Let's do some math real quick. Okay, so let's say Walmart is 4 acres. It's 4 acres of solid surface runoff. So it's going to rain 1 inch. Okay? And let's say it's a heavy rain. It's going to rain 1 inch in an hour, which is a pretty decent rain, right? So you say 27,154 divided by 43,560 times 4. I think that's right. What you get?
I started out multiplying this by 4, so I did it wrong.
Okay. So let's just say, okay, let's do this. Let's do 4 acres. How many square feet is in 4 acres? So 43,560 times 4. $174. Okay, so that's square footage. Okay. Now, I'm getting myself confused here. Okay, so that's how many square feet per acre, right? So you can say.
Wait, that's for the whole 4 acres.
That's for the whole 4 acres. So you can say 27,154 divided by 43,560 times that number. Okay, so
I believe you.
yeah. Okay,
But
so let's just do this. Do 27,154
So that's 0.6233 times
Yes.
4.
times what's the number you got before?
it was 17.
Times 17.
I don't have it.
Hang on, let me do it.
Help us, please.
Okay, so I'm going to do 27,154. 154 divided by 43,560. 0.62 with some change. All right. Then times, what's the number you got? 170.
What did you ask me to get that number?
43,560 times 4. Yeah. 174.
174.
174,240.
Thank you.
Math is not my strong
Okay, mine neither. 108,000 gallons. Actually, it's almost 109,000 gallons of water in 1 hour. So how big you got? What are you going to do with all that water? So all that to say is, places like Walmart, Target, Publix, wherever it may be, if there's a solid surface runoff, you got a lot of water you have to deal with. So stormwater management, going back to that, and not rain gardens, you really have to do a lot to manage this. And it's the same way with your house, it's just on a smaller scale. You do have to do things to mitigate that water, especially, I mean, we get some heavy rains, especially in the spring when we get these storms, right? What are we doing with that water? If it's running off into the road, everybody's not going to have a rain garden, but it can help you eliminate a lot of the pollutants that come in there. You don't have the erosion factor, especially if you have a steeper yard. So there are things you can do on the small scale that would help that. Okay. So we kind of went through this. This is figuring up your square footage. So if it's coming off your house, you can just walk it off. This is just a kind of a rough estimate. You can get on Google and measure it if you want to, but the easiest thing is just kind of walk it off. If you have a long tape measure, like a 100-foot tape measure, measure it out. And remember, a roof, for the most part, everybody has different shaped roofs, right? Well, most roofs are like a gable. So most of the time, you're only going to deal with one side of that house. So that's something to remember. Your house may be, let's say, 50 by 30, but you're only dealing with half of that. So it may be 1,500 square feet on top of your roof, but you're only using half of that because you're only using half that water on that side of the house. So that's something to remember too. Also, if you have multiple downspouts, let's say you have a 700, you're dealing with 750, which is half of 1,500. You have 2 downspouts, use half of that. So what's half? 7, 2, 375? Sure. Right? Close enough. So, but that is something to remember there. Okay, so once you have your square footage, you got to figure out your capture depth, and that's the amount of rainfall you want to in your rain garden tree. So usually 1 inch is about what we go for here in Alabama. So you also go what's called ponding depth, and the ponding depth is depth which you want the water to pond in the rain garden. Usually 3 or 6 inches. So, and I'll show you a picture of that here in a second. So, you're going to have your square foot, how much water is coming off your roof or wherever it is, and then you're going to figure out how many inches of ponding do you want. Do you want a 6-inch depth or you want a 3-inch depth? Now, when y'all designed this one out here, do you remember how deep it was?
No?
I don't think it's too deep.
No, it's had some overflow pipe also in the basement.
Yeah.
That will go, to channel that too.
Yeah. So, but usually 3 or 6 inches is about how deep you want it to climb. So there is a formula. So essentially what it comes to is about 10% for 3 inches. So you have 3 inches here. You divide that by 10, or you can multiply it by 0.1, and that'll be 10%. So if you have a 5,000 square foot roof, or that's the amount of space you're dealing with, you want your rain garden to be about 500 square feet. Now, 500 square feet could be 10 by 50, or it could be any combination of those. So, and it is a rough estimate. So you can make it a little bit larger if you want to, or a little bit smaller. But in general, that's what you want to design it with. If you want to go 6 inches, which is double that, you just divide by 20. So it's 20% of that. So if you have a 5,000 square foot roof, 20% of that is 1,000 square feet, right? Okay. So it's double the other. Okay. So about 10% of the total surface runoff. So you have your square foot of your runoff, and you want about 10% of that. And then building a catchment. So you said y'all did build a catchment or a pipe to drain it off, right?
Well, it has that, injectable, water vent. You have to overflow. The pipe is down here, the water will, if it gets too high, will go into that cage out there.
Right.
And it will go, and it goes into the sea.
So there is some, if you have a heavy rain,
Every time.
so you can use a catchment basin and a drain pipe if you want to. So that's another thing you can do. We've talked about soil types, the three general soil types. Sand flows through really well. I guess it really depends. I would assume most of Coleman County has pretty heavy clay. I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
Which means bad infiltration rate. So if you have clay, you have these really small particles. A lot of times it don't want to hurt really quickly. So silt is kind of ideal. Like if you have a sandy, silty situation in your yard, that's really ideal. I live in Arab, and I have a somewhat sandy soil. So surprisingly. So let's talk about perk. I've mentioned perking, right? And that's short for percolation. So you want to test your infiltration rate of your soil when you're designing your rain garden. Dig a hole about 12 inches deep, so a foot deep, and about 6 inches wide, so basically a post hole digger. And then fill the hole about 2 to 3 times because you want it to saturate that soil. And sometimes it may take a while. It may take several hours. It may take a couple of days. But you do want to test that and let it drain out completely. And then fill the hole again and then wait and see how long it takes to drain out. Again, clay soils are going to be a little bit harder to deal with. If you have heavy clay, you may have to do some creative situations there. But this is how you do a percolation test or a perk test. All right, so in a sandy soil, within an hour. If you have sandy soil like I do, it's going to perk out real quick. Moderate, so if you have a loamy situation, within 8 hours, it will perk out. Slow, if you have a really clay soil, it doesn't completely drain within 24 hours. So yeah, soils don't perk well and don't work well unless they're excavated deeply and the soil totally replaced. So it really just depends on your situation. Everybody's is going to be completely different. All right, and then most rain gardens are dug in a bowl shape. I mentioned that earlier at the beginning. You know, it's a garden in the shape of a bowl, right? And it really depends on the slope of your surrounding area and how deep that is. And your book has some really great info on how this is more in depth. This is just kind of an overview. So if it's perfectly flat, the garden only needs to be about 3 or 4 inches deep. So if you have a fairly flat yard, this is a perfect situation for that. All right, so most areas are not perfectly flat though. But the center depression, so the bottom of that should be no deeper than 8 inches. So if you have a greater slope, the more depression you need to hold more water. So once you start your garden, one of the biggest things you can do is call 811. You can call them. You can actually go online. I did that last year when I was digging some new water lines for my house. And you just go online. I think it's 811.org or something like that. You just Google 811 and it takes you directly to the website. So put in a ticket number, and usually within either a couple of days or maybe a day or two, they'll come out and they'll mark it. If you don't do this and you hit a line, you're going to be liable, especially if it's something big like a fiber optic line. Do not hit a fiber optic line. You'll be in some deep stuff if you hit a fiber optic line, because they're not cheap to fix. So always call before you dig. All right. So you dig your hole deeper if augmentation is necessary. So if you need to change it, and again, it does depend on the soil type. Sand, 12 inches, the depth from the rim to the bottom of it. Clay, you want to dig it a little bit deeper because that clay soil is going to hold water a lot longer. So I would say on this, you do need to replace some of that heavy clay. Amend it with some compost or something that's organic matter. Don't use sand because guess what? Sand and clay makes concrete. So stay away from sand. Even though sand does percolate well, you want to avoid that when you're amending. All right, Holly, I'm going to let you talk about this. Since this is your area right here, I don't know anything about this part right here. So
You got some slides I didn't have.
you can. Okay.
So this is the area, really, over here, we've already gotten the beginning of the deck started. I have a slide, that's in on the descriptions on the outside. Wish we could see it. I wish I could walk.
We can later.
Yeah, we'll do it. And so here's after the side, the cities come out and paved, or somebody came out and paved the rain garden. The only thing that they changed is it's supposed to be a big bowl, overflow. And then they decided that coming into the parking lot did not need to be going around anything, so they just locked off 9 feet. So, it changed the whole design of this observation. We're planner.
That's the green button.
Yeah, so this, it doesn't even have right there, unless I'm looking, no, I'm looking, okay, we're looking east here, okay. They still haven't finished their, this is going to be a ramp that's out there right now, it hasn't been finished. I will say that this, the deck that you see out there was built by 2 master gardeners of their life. Which, I don't think they didn't try it yet. And like I said, here's this, let's move along and let me see, is that, I'm trying to see what this is.
It's a little bit hard to see.
It is really hard to move along.
Yeah.
Okay, see this.
So was was water there collecting?
Oh, yes, oh, that's what I'm saying, it's on my slide.
Oh.
It's on the blue slide. I can show you the collecting water.
I don't know if I have that one in here. This is what
He
Tom
said he did. He said put it in there. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So yes, this is me. This is me and my truck. This is a work day we've had. Continued maintenance like any garden. What happens when you have a place for all the water to go? And it hasn't. We've maybe had spring. Everything's blooming. Some stuff's gone to seed. Or say, and even in the summer, and we have really hard torrential rains. Where does the water go? It goes to the rain garden. What's on the paper? Lots of, worse than that, weed seeds. Weed seeds. And it just flows right through the garden and is sitting on top. Even though I have a lot, you go out there right now, you will see 24 rolls of pine on top. It's a 6-inch pad this time because we were determined it was going to last the winter. So we did that, but it's always constant digging the noxious weeds out of your rain garden, especially if you have it like this. I don't know oftentimes when that labor, I did find it in my truck. That is my whole workshop and everything, and we usually, to see the back of that, that's usually full of weeds by the time we finish one weed of that. Okay, so let's advance a little bit. Let's see what else is going on. This is,
Oh, it's a video.
you got me. I didn't know you did that. I'm not talking to everybody else. were digging stuff out, it was solid clay. Did you ever try to throw a pot on a wheel? Anything? You seen pinch pots and stuff like that? It was ready, except there was rocks in it. It was that. It was still moist, and it was extremely heavy. And if you tried to drill anything into that, it was just bad. So they had to scoop it all the way out. Now, you said, I thought it was a lot deeper than that. Like it's not. I think it was 6 feet. That's Tony. Tony, is that 6 feet? I think
So it was really wet.
it was extremely wet.
Yeah.
Like I said, we were here having a meeting, and we could hear the rain on the roof. It was a very heavy rain, and we decided that maybe we should go, and maybe the sirens were going. I can't remember. But we looked out, and the water was already 6 inches in that parking lot. It was up getting to the rim of the parking lot, over the tire of the bottom part of the tire. And we decided that was a really bad situation, and it wasn't going to work very well to have a lot of conferences and classes and things like that. That was continuing. So that's when Tony decided this is what was going to happen. This rain garden is the largest one in North Alabama. It is. Huge crowd. So you need to drain if the surrounding soil does not drain well, and that is exactly what we did out front. We put a drain. And I have it actually sketched in, if you can get to the slides. You ever seen the slides? He said they're in there. There's, okay, it's still working well, yes. It didn't come up like that all of a sudden. And what I really like is you don't really see it too much because it doesn't last too long. But this pond cypress is gorgeous. Did you see it right now? This thing? It's in the middle of the, it's actually surrounded by seating in the middle of the deck. And it is, it looks like it's dead. Everybody thinks the pond cypress is dying because it's a beautiful color of orange. Looks like it's infested. It does. It looks like it's under some sort of rust infestation, but it's just really beautiful. And it's a deciduous cypress. So, that's what I'm looking for. This is what I'm looking for. Those, I have 5 slides in here, supposedly, and I have little plaques all the way around the observation deck that point you to different things in it. If you can find them.
I don't.
You don't have that right now. He said it there. Okay.
Yeah.
Somewhere. Okay. We did. I had it written down. I was reading from the slide.
Yeah.
Let me just read from my slide.
Okay.
And I'll go back to my glasses. There's no way I'm going to read that from my slide. This is under what's down below slide. It says, I had a diagram of the different layers of soil, different layers of the rain garden. First we dug a swale, removing the native soil completely. Next, a 4 to 6 inch layer of gravel was put on the bottom. And then we had an overflow inlet that was installed, plus an outflow, which is then surrounded by a mix of 85% sand and 15% native soil. That was our mix that we did. Kind of sort of because it's a kind of an inexact science when you're doing it all. He says we think we got a little more soil than the sand that we're supposed to. And that's called a bioretention soil. So the plants are added to this layer and topped with a thick layer of pine straw. The garden provides a temporary potting area which will hold water up to 2 days. And so that's what and all of my things have water has a destination. That was the whole thing about it. Water has a destination. So there we go. And this is our pine bark does not go into the garden because of all the weeds I was getting. I finally put down some fabric. What we do have right out there now is by the time next spring it's there, we will probably have this much soil from the heat and the sun to compost that pine straw. We use pine straw because it doesn't shift, it doesn't float. Bark floats away. The straw just stays put. It will, since it's so fine, compost fast. I've already once dug 6 inches off
whole area out there. And then replace it with another big layer of pine straw, and it needs to be. I can't wait. Kira says maybe we can get some help for you this year. Yeah. Oh, something we need now.
Yes, that's your ideal soil mix there.
Yeah.
That's, again,
I wouldn't touch
ideal.
clay. I wouldn't put, we took the clay out.
The
But
good
it
thing
came
about
out in
clay-
chunks like this.
Yeah, the good thing about clay is it can hold on to minerals, so that's the good thing about it. So
That's
some clay content is not terrible, but when you have heavy clay,
Well,
You don't
once
get
our
percolation
soil back
rate,
in, I still kept finding, baseball size. It wasn't blocks,
just in clumps.
in clumps.
Yeah.
I find it again.
Yeah, and usually a root is going to kind of take the path of least resistance. So if it hits one of those clumps, it's going to go around it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so if you do have a heavy clay soil, that's when you want to consider an under drain to move that water out of there. Typically, if it holds water for 2 days, that's when you want to do that. So, again, elevation differences allow water to drain away from the rain garden area. So you have to have somewhere for that excess water to go. Yeah. So this is yeah. So water doesn't flow uphill. So that's the plumber's. I won't get into the other half of that plumber's secret, but it doesn't flow uphill, right? So it's always going to have to drain somewhere downhill. So if you do have to put in a drain under all that, make sure it's sloped correctly. If you are on a slope and you're creating one of this, you want to make a berm. And a berm is kind of like a low little rise, like a little hill. And you want to put that around your rain garden. And you want to put it on the downhill side. So it's almost like a little dam on the back side of that. So you're coming down that slope, and it hits them. That's an extreme example, but it comes down. This is your native soil that drains well, or this is your rain garden that drains well, and then you want to build up a little lip on that other side. And so that will retain some of that water. It also, if you have a heavy rain, it will slow that rain down. So it has to fill all this up, and then once it does overflow, it just kind of slowly flows over that. So again, that helps prevent washout, helps prevent erosion. So and it stops initial runoff. So if you have a really fast, like a heavy rain, like a microburst or something that just dumps out rain all of a sudden, it helps with that initial runoff. Because like I showed you in that video, it's just moving. It'll just skip over that.
So how do you keep that berm from washing until you get the plants established?
So you definitely don't want to use sand.
Okay.
So that is something, if you do have a little bit of a clay, that would be a good spot for that.
Put your berm.
So yeah, and when you're building it, even if you have a loamy type soil, pack it. So take your shovel or something and just kind of pack it around, and that'll help stabilize that for a while. And it'll settle down a little bit, and we do that trick all the time. It's redirecting water is what we were doing. So you can use that berm to hold back that water and slow it down. And then you can stabilize it with sod too. So if you have sod, native grasses, sedges, anything like that, a lot of the grasses have really deep roots, and that's a good thing. You can plant alongside that berm. Sod is okay too. Also, sod's very expensive, but you can use sod, especially if it's in a small area like that. That's something you can easily incorporate. So, but native grasses and sedges, those are really good. There's a lot of native grasses and a lot of things that you can use to put on the edge of that berm to kind of stabilize that soil. Okay, you have this handout in the book. Like I said, there's some really good information in there. It gets a little more in depth about design and layout and things. Thank you. And it kind of gives you a little more information about, especially like what plant species to use. It's got its common name, some comments about it. you know, what it loves, what it doesn't love. So even if you do have a shady part of your yard, it'll tell you that these plants are recommended for that. And I'm sure this is not a incomplete list. I mean, there's probably tons more plants that you can use, but this is a good reference. This is a good starting place. I would recommend that if you want to do this and you're serious about, you know, trying to help stop the flow of water or build an actual rain garden, even if you just want one to collect some rainwater off your roof, you know, you can do rain barrels. You can do rain gardens. It just depends on what you want to do with that. So yeah, y'all have any questions? We kind of ran through this real quick, but I guess the biggest takeaway I would say is if you want to do a rain garden, make sure you do your perk rate. Figure out what type of soil you have and how is it going to drain well. That's step number one. If it doesn't drain well, you have a heavy clay soil, you may have to get a little bit more creative, and that's where, you know, you can use this reference guide. And we have a whole section, I guess you'd call it, department, I don't know what you call it, an extension, that they can help you with this. So I can help you as much as I can, but we have a whole staff dedicated to doing things like this. So Eve Brantley is the head of that, so if you want to reach out to her, I can get you her contact information. And then Tony as well. He's retired, but he's still working. He's never going to stop. So he's also great, full of information. He was an extension agent for years and years and years, so he kind of knows what's happening. So, but yeah, and then figuring up your square footage. You know, how much water is coming off your house, and then size your garden based on that. So again, if you have a 1,500 square feet roof, you know, and that's both sides of your roof, half that because you're only using one side, and then 10% of that's about what you want to do. So if you have 500 square feet that you're dealing with, you need about a 50 square foot rain garden. So a lot of math. Y'all didn't expect math, did you? Yeah. So, how many square feet's an acre? That's your quiz. 43,560. Look, if you don't go away with nothing else, 43,560 can be used everywhere. So, but yeah. Again, there are some PDFs. You're probably not going to write all that down. That's okay. But again, that handout's really, really good. And that's what those are. So, if you don't mind, if you would scan that and take a survey, I appreciate that. And if y'all have any questions, if y'all want to go look out, yeah, we can go look out there.
There is a.
And I'll have a flashlight in my truck, so we can
I
use
would
that.
like